All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is our International Business Center Global Business Club webinar session on winning strategies for trade shows and trade missions. So, our main speaker today is Mr. John Gelmisi, and a big thank you to MEDC for their help with this session. To start by sharing a bit about the MSU International Business Center, we have been designated since 1990 as a National Resource Center by the U.S. Department of Education. We're something known as a CIBER, Center for International Business Education and Research, and we are one of 15 of these CIBERs across the country. Our main mission is to provide superior education, research, and assistance to businesses, public policy makers, academics, and students on international business and trade. As part of that, we have a program called the Global Business Club, which is meant to serve as a bridge linking Michigan exporters and allies with a wealth of research-driven resources. As part of this Global Business Club, we have two main areas that we focus on. So the first is our Market Spotlight series, which is a series of yearly in-person events held around the state that focus on different global markets. Events feature market overviews, a panel of business representatives who will share experiences and best practices for the market, and opportunities for networking. Just to share quickly, our next Market Spotlight event will focus on South Korea and be held at the Detroit Institute of Arts on December 11, if you're interested in coming. Aside from this, we also hold a series of educational webinars. These are yearly webinars held on international business topics, such as the session you are in right now. To learn more, feel free to visit our website, or you can follow the Global Business Club of Michigan on LinkedIn. So now to start, I'd like to introduce our main speaker, Mr. John Gelmisi. So John has been serving as an international trade manager with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, also known as MEDC. Prior to this role, he served as the Engineering Services Director supporting product development and international expansion for companies in Michigan. From this experience, John is a fantastic resource and fountain of knowledge for how to make the best use of trade shows and trade missions. After a presentation from John, we are also joined today by Linda Wojciechowicz, who is the Global Sales Director at NuStep. She has had a career in sales across several industries and frequently travels to trade missions and trade shows. Linda also helps share her knowledge through working with the MSU International Business Center as a co-chair for our Global Business Club. A big thank you to her, and now excited to move on to John.
Thank you, Hannah. Appreciate that. I will share my screen here. And thank you, everybody, for joining. I'm John Gelmisi with the MEDC, and I'm going to share some best practices and steps for success on trade shows and trade missions. As Hannah had said, I come from about 25 years of helping businesses grow here in Southeast Michigan, both domestically and globally. And a lot of these bullet points I'm going to share, they're common sense, but they're also good to keep in mind, and best practices are always something that sometimes we don't always use, but I took the time to create a document that I always try to follow and has helped me to have better success at trade shows and trade missions. And even working with the MEDC, I use these same principles whenever I do attend a show. So I'll go ahead and get started here. Um, each year, there are thousands of domestic and global trade shows and trade missions covering all major technology and service sectors. The questions to ask are, should you attend, and is it worth the cost and time? Should you get a booth? Should you purchase sponsorships? How many team members should participate? Should you prepare both before the event and after? Are there state or federal grants available? Are there foreign offices that can support your export planning and growth? So there's talking points and decision making to take, throughout this decision making process. So trade shows and trade missions, they're a good barometer to see who in your industry is growing, who has new business momentum, to see product innovations, and to see the creativity that is being showcased by others in your industry. It's a chance to remind prospective clients that you're still around, to share ideas on potential collaborations, and to let them know that you're keeping up with their activities. It's easy to get a list of trade shows and trade missions for the next 12 to 18 months through the internet searches, and it may be worth attending and match up with your core competencies, products, and services. Many competing companies or potential customers are showcased in the exhibitor listings at these shows, so you can prepare in advance to meet with them. Pre-meeting conversations are a vital part of successful participation. The goal is to ensure a successful event before it even starts. I make sure before I even step on the plane that I know it's going to be a successful show by taking many of these steps into practice. So, trade shows and trade missions allow you to gauge interest in your product and services by a wider audience in a short amount of time and to simultaneously see what your competition is up to. And yes, your competition will almost always be at the good shows. So, trade shows and trade missions will often have directors, VPs, and other senior management attending that you might not get a chance to meet otherwise. Even CEOs and executives often attend and make themselves available. In a matter of seconds, they can share valuable information about their entire company that might lead to a first opportunity. It's an opportunity to spend 2 to 5 minutes with someone that is generally not accessible. Plus, when you can drop their names with scanned business cards and emails when reaching out to potential contacts afterwards, getting connected is much more likely. And just as important, many supply chain managers and purchasing agents attend. They make it their responsibility to get to know potential suppliers. And to put it bluntly, they will usually not buy anything from you unless they know you and feel comfortable that you're likely to be around long term and a fixture in the industry. Trade shows and trade missions are a great opportunity to mingle with senior supply chain managers who often speak during scheduled meeting forums or at their booth about how to do business with them and the processes that might be followed to get your first purchase order. I can give a good example. I actually went on an MEDC trade mission to Seattle for Boeing, and I listened to the VP of supply chain and purchasing put out all the steps to become a vendor. And then when I did fill out requests for a quote, I made sure that every bullet point that was stated during that gathering, I made sure it was part of our quotation. And when it came time to review it with Boeing, they said it was almost like I knew exactly what was on the supply chain manager's mind. So I can tell you, there's a lot to be gathered from these shows when people in supply chain or purchasing are speaking about doing business with them. The relationship building opportunities from business to business meetings, they're probably the most valuable part of the trade show and trade mission for me. It's almost a requirement for this to be a feature before I will attend a show. It will often be procurement personnel that attend these meetings, which is great because they are almost always part of the decision-making process to select new suppliers. They will often hold the key to getting purchase orders and long-term business opportunities, and they will often get your corporate briefing before you meet. When you want to work with a large OEM or major supplier, if you don't go through the proper channels, getting business can be frustrating. Supply chain managers, buyers, procurement departments can be your best friends. Outreach to these individuals prior to the show is very important. And be sure to follow up the next week, the next month, the month after that. But remember, there's a fine line between, often enough and too often. And also, make sure that you're not like a business card gatherer. Sometimes I look at piles of business cards from years past, and it's a good reminder that I didn't do everything I needed to do after a show to turn those cards into purchase orders. So, sponsorships and marketing efforts before, during, and after. Almost all trade shows and trade missions provide many opportunities for brand enhancement and name recognition. These range from sponsoring lanyards, social hours, refreshment centers, displays, and when prospects you are chasing get used to seeing your brand and identity, their perception of your company can improve, and they're more apt to remember you later. From personal experience, I can tell you it's often the same people that attend similar events, and they often become your colleagues after a few shows, which makes getting contacts and discussing potential business opportunities much easier. I'll give you an example of a show that Chris and I were on in Paris. It was the defense show, Eurosatori. We were given an $8,000 budget to have a wine, cheese, and snack, couple hours. And we went booth to booth. We handed out about 100 invitations, and we actually had a huge number of companies come and mingle with 10 Michigan-based companies at our booth. There are a lot of business cards exchanged. There was a lot of personal relationships that developed. And I can tell you now, it's only 5 months after that show in June, and our client companies have already reported over $1 million in purchase orders. So that's an $8,000 investment that's already turned into $1 million in POs. So, when attending trade shows and trade missions, you actually have three opportunities to connect. One, prior to the show, when you read through the exhibitor list and reach out. Two, through the B2B meetings that are often part of the event. And three, by visiting the booths and introducing yourself, not to mention the foot traffic your booth will generate if you exhibit. And it can be considered a fourth opportunity after the show when you reach out to those you met. It's also fine to contact other people that work at the companies that exhibited, via LinkedIn or other business related social media, and letting them know that you personally visited their booth and have some ideas on collaborations based on the conversations you had. It works much better than a cold call. People are much more receptive upon receiving a call when you actually visited their booth, whether they were at the show or not. So, what are the costs and how do you calculate value and benefit of your investment? Realistically, during business development activities, the cost of having one or two people travel to meet with 20 to 40 potential customers located domestically and globally can cost anywhere between $50 and $100,000 annually when you consider airfare, hotel, car rental, food expenses, and not to mention the most costly item, which is losing between 30 to 40 full days of productivity per person, just in the travel days and logistics planning. So to accomplish this all at 35% or less of the cost, depending on your booth size, to attend 3 to 4 targeted shows annually, it's a bargain. So attending trade shows and missions can give valuable insight into who you should spend time chatting with and which companies should be on your pursuit list. Many missions attendees lead the market in their products and services. People from purchasing, buyers, supply chain management do seek out new vendors at these events because those that attend generally have something worth selling, and these shows aren't cheap. Additionally, the partnership you develop with the event organizers is very important. The good ones take time to make sure it's a good fit between your business and others attending the show. A good event organizer will take the time to understand your niche and if there will be opportunities for you. It's important to them to ensure that everyone attending has the potential for generating new business and creating new relationships that will benefit you later. It must be worth everyone's time or there won't be a show next year. The speakers attending, the workshops provided, the exhibitors demonstrating products and services all need to have an audience that is interested and finds value. And there needs to be enough overlap with the majority of these activities that complement your business, or it's the wrong event for you. And remember, speakers or those that moderate workshops are often well connected and good to befriend. So put the event organizers to work to ensure they do their part to help you have a successful event. Sign up early. Booth location matters. And complete the B2B meeting scheduling opportunities as soon as possible. OEM suppliers have limited slots and time, and you will end up with your third and fourth choices otherwise if you don't hustle to start. So, additional thoughts, trade shows and missions are a good opportunity to get a snapshot of the latest industry trends and where the market is heading. It's really important to know this when making your 3 and 5 year business plans. Knowing more about emerging markets could give you an advantage over your competition. This is a great opportunity to see your competition in action as well. Trade shows and trade missions can also be about bolstering your supply chain and meeting similar sized companies that can partner with you on major projects. It's the chance to see if you can support overflow projects for some of the bigger competitors, since you likely won't be a threat for their mega projects. And it's also a great place to find global partners that might be able to reciprocate with regard to regional or global office spaces and client contacts. Finding a similar sized complementary partner that is in a market you want to reach out to and help them do the same in your market. I've actually seen this a lot lately. It's a great way to save money, save time, to have boots in the ground real early where you have potential for a good emerging market, and if you do the same for someone, it could be a great relationship. Industry events are the best ways to get a feel for the value of your products and interest in your current offerings. It's also an opportunity to modify strategic direction as you learn about your place in the industry compared to your competition. Taking advantage of our foreign offices and their matchmaking expertise has resulted in well over $100 million in export revenue for Michigan companies. They do a lot of the legwork in your behalf and can be a free service with a good export business plan. And then know what certifications you need to comply with programs and requirements. So here's some general information. Most major cities and counties have support options for international growth. U.S. commercial services have heavily subsidized programs for matchmaking, how to export training, and booth space at their pavilions. Find budget-friendly resources to research global markets and help you understand where there may be export opportunities can be a challenge. Engage with MSU's International Business Center as they have access to the latest global product and services usage reports by country or region, and they can conduct research in your behalf at little or to no cost. So the fundamentals of exporting, if you're new to it, can be daunting. So take the mystery out and learn what you need to know from organizations like the Van Andel Global Trade Center, who have some subsidies from the MEDC, so they can help you out. When growing your export business, it may be time to invest in translation services for products or search engine optimization for your website that can be tuned to various geographies. Establishing country or language-based website extensions to better reach your customers or desired market are an important part of foreign market growth, not to mention a great way to mitigate risk during local economic downturns. So ask the MEDC about our partners that support international website development. Export and import financing and product shipping insurance best practices can be supported by the Export Import Bank, who have local representatives here in Michigan, and we can introduce you to them. And then the best part, grants from the MEDC, such as the Michigan State Trade Expansion Program, the Michigan STEP. It's a great way to reduce the cost of airfare, hotel, and trade show costs by 50%, and that's $15,000 annually. So the grant funding opened November, so just a couple weeks ago, and it generally does run out by the spring each year. So contact your MEDC International Trade Manager right away to learn more about the program. It can be used for participation in foreign trade missions, international trade shows, sometimes domestic shows where the foreign visitor and booth participation exceeds 25%, and foreign sales trips. So it's very simple. 50% of your airfare, hotel, and trade show or booth costs can be reimbursed up to $15,000. So that means if you have $30,000 in costs for these three types of things, 15,000 can come right back to you. Basically, what I did is I doubled my budget for shows every year based on this program, and it was fantastic. We'll make this document available to you. We've got some links on Michigan State's trade expansion program. There's also a form if you're new to international trade that you can fill out so that the MEDC trade manager will have some of the background information on you. The International Trade Centers, MEDC Global Office and partner locations, there's a link for that. And then a good export services gateway. A lot of things you may need to know for exporting, importing, banking, legal, small business administration, the MMTC, service provider directory, all on this link here. And then also, with the help of Michigan State University's International Business Center, the MEDC helped to organize this nice Export Michigan directory with a lot of good information. So these are all live links here that you can click on. And then my favorite slide, and something I didn't realize till I started the MEDC, this is Michigan's trade centers. You can see that the largest markets in the world all are represented by Michigan's foreign offices here. So this is a great way to put a process in place to expand your exports or to get into it. A good process that I would generally suggest is get in touch with us so that Michigan State can do some research for you. Find out where the best market for your product or service is. Then engage with our foreign office, and they can help with matchmaking. And then you can do the next steps. You know, do you do webinars? Do you do on-site meetings? Is it time to travel? So it's a great process to go through to see if there are other niches available for your products globally. So, guess I can open up to Q&A.
Thank you, John. We do have one question of someone wondering, how do you calculate ROI to see if you plan on getting a booth? Oftentimes, this is a question by management in order to get approval.
Yeah, you can't anticipate your purchase orders before you get them. Um, but what you can do is, like I gave the example. Where else can you meet so many potential prospects in one place? If you do your research and find the right trade show, if you go through the process of identifying who you want to meet with beforehand, if you make sure that you set up the meetings before the show even starts. The nice thing is if you do all this legwork ahead of time, um, trade shows are hectic. People walk around all over the place. Everyone has their own agenda. Even if you don't meet with that person that you had that meeting scheduled for, they'll probably meet with you after the show, because you've already demonstrated that there's a potential need for your service or your product. And I, to me, it's about 10 times easier to have a meeting with someone I met at a trade show than calling them out of the blue or knocking on the door or sending an email when they haven't known me before. Um, using this approach, attending MEDC trade missions and trade shows, I personally reported millions of dollars in export sales that I would not have gotten, without this type of a system in place.
Perfect. Thank you. So with that, I'm going to go and move on. Oh, we have one more question for you, and then we can ask Linda some questions, and then we'll have further time for Q&A at the end. So, can you discuss trade pavilions and how these work?
Sure. The MEDC will host a pavilion and take care of most of the cost burden. Um, on average, we'll take about 8 to 10 companies. It could be a defense show, it could be an aerospace show, it could be automotive, it could be medical, other products and services. And these are usually large trade shows. It could be 500, 1,000, 2,000, 2,500 companies exhibiting, plus those that walk the show as well. So it could be hundreds of thousands of people at an event. And then what we do is we partner with our foreign offices so that in addition to the outreach you may do, in addition to what our foreign office may do to help with one-on-one meetings, um, they'll then spend some time with you and understand your product or service. They'll reach out and they'll try and do the matchmaking for the show over there. Typical show cost could be two, three, $4,000. Again, that half of that's covered by the STEP program. Your airfare for economy flight, 50% covered. Your hotel, 50% covered. There'll be a pre-mission briefing by our foreign office on the event. Chris, you have some things to add as well, because I know you've often been, part of these trade shows and meetings, and you were even my shepherd once when I was part of your flock during some of the air shows.
Now, the only thing I'd add is that oftentimes there's a U.S. pavilion, and within the U.S. pavilion, we have a Michigan pavilion. So the U.S. Commercial Service does an incredible job at the major trade shows around the world, and they're definitely our partner as we travel with Michigan companies. So they provide an area so that and I've noticed it mostly at medical shows and defense shows, but the whole world wants to find the technology that's coming out of the U.S. and folks from other countries are looking for the U.S. pavilion. They may not be familiar with the state of Michigan, but they know the U.S. pavilion, and it's just a way that it kind of gathers everyone together. So anytime you're at a show and you have the opportunity to participate in the U.S. pavilion, I highly recommend it. And often cases, if it's a major show, there may be other state pavilions if you're from another state. But yeah, I think maybe the question was leaning towards U.S. pavilions, and then there's usually a center where the U.S. Commercial Service, they'll bring folks from around the world. They also are able to provide some great matchmaking and make some connections. Usually there's some meeting space that they provide in addition to the space you may have in your booth. So there's a lot of benefits for being active in a pavilion. So that's, I guess, what I have to add.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris.
Perfect. So with that, let's move on to learning from Linda. And then, as mentioned, feel free to continue adding your questions into the chat or the Q&A. So Linda, in preparation for trade missions, do you ever do any research on other participants that you might be traveling with?
Yep. I'm glad you asked the question. I first want to thank both John and Chris. Everything that you've provided in this meeting, I have done. So I've been working on exports for my company for 5 years. I started going to the pavilion at a mission called Arab Health, or a trade show called Arab Health. I was a part of the USA booth with the state of Michigan. I then took the brave step of doing a trade mission to both India and most recently to South America. And now I do trade shows with my own booth, having progressed over the years, specifically with the help of MEDC, U.S. Commercial Services, and joining the Global Business Club with Hannah's tutorials and everything that they provide. So I've used almost every single resource. The most important is the STEP program. So Hannah, your question was, and thank you for asking me to attend today. Your question was, do I do a lot of research before I go? And of course, I try to ensure that I'm finding out the most I can about every single attendee and every single customer that might be there. And so I first go to websites, find out if their website and their company aligns with what I'm looking for. And then I go to the people that I know are going to be in attendance if I know the list. And then I try to connect with them on LinkedIn, so that we have that connection prior to leaving for the trade mission and the trade shows. And even for the people who attend with me, should it be sponsored by MEDC or the exports, et cetera, or the trade missions. So I can make that connection before we even leave the country. And so it makes it a little easier to know a little bit about them before I get there.
Perfect. For trade missions and shows, do you normally study the country's culture prior to departure? And then if so, what resources do you use or what would you recommend?
Yep. My first one that I went to at the U.S. Pavilion was Arab Health. And so while I thought I knew a lot about the culture of the Middle East, I actually asked a lot of people in attendance about some of the cultural differences between the United States. Last week, I got back from China. One of the things that probably a lot of people on this call know about is when you hand somebody in Asia your business card, it's with 2 hands, and you take the time to read somebody's business card. Those small things go a long way. In the United States, we talk a lot of slang. So you have to realize what we do with our hand gestures isn't similar outside of the country. And you have to be real cognizant of it. And it's really about learning, Googling things, but more importantly, asking questions of resources that we have in the state of Michigan. It goes a long way.
Great. So also for trade missions, do you ever do research in advance on companies that you know or think you might be meeting with for different B2B meetings?
Yeah, absolutely. So I first have to understand if their company aligns with what I'm doing. There's no, you try waste no time. And so prior to the meetings, I really try to do as much research as possible. I bring a lot of reading material on the plane. Those are long flights to go over. And so I have something in common before that meeting begins. And then I can start asking questions so that we don't waste time. There's not a lot of, time that you get to spend with each of the attendees. And so you want to make certain your points are on par and you get the most valuable information while you have that short period of time with them.
Perfect. So also for trade shows and trade missions, do you ever send any introductory letters, company marketing materials, or email blasts in advance to kind of help show who you are before even arriving?
I absolutely do. And actually, I learned this from an attendee when I went to South America for the trade mission. He sent a letter the night before the meeting to all of the people he was meeting with. And I thought that was brilliant. And it was short. It was just to the point. It said, I'm excited to meet you. So beyond doing all of the prep work prior to trying to connect with them on LinkedIn, he had the forethought of saying, I'm looking forward to meeting with you. I actually have included PDFs of my materials. I don't want to spend my entire meeting time, which is so valuable, going over the intricacies of the product itself. Rather, it's more top line focus on the industry and how I can help them in their location, or how I can service the needs of what they're looking for.
I just realized actually maybe we should start with a question for you to just tell us a bit about NuStep and the kinds of products.
Yeah, that was so NuStep is a manufacturer of exercise equipment that is used in the medical field, specifically rehabilitation, in cardiac rehab and physical therapy. It is used in fitness, but you'll first find us first and foremost in the healthcare space. We've been in production in Ann Arbor and now Plymouth, Michigan for over 27 years. And so our exporting business is extremely important to us. It represents nearly 15% of our overall volume. We're a mid-sized company. So mid-size, I mean between 40 and 80 million. And we continue to grow, not only in international. When I started, it was 10% of our company size. Now it's up to 15. And the goal by the end of the year is really to reach and exceed 20%. And we can only do that with partnerships like the trade missions, like the trade shows, because the reality is you can try to go to a country all by yourself and do as much resource as you can. But without support and without understanding the market and without understanding the culture, the valuable time you spend is sort of wasted. When you can partner with the state of Michigan and they're helping to vet the companies, they do interviews with you and they help support you along the way, it's so much more beneficial. And believe me when I say the resources that they give you far outweigh the costs, especially because NuStep always takes advantage of the STEP grants, always. When that window opens up, I immediately submit my application for the valuable resources that the state gives back to a company like ours. So yes, thank you for letting me introduce my company.
Of course.
Forgot that part.
Yeah. And then for another question, so do you ever use LinkedIn or any other social media platforms, either before, during, or after the event?
I do. And it's not just about NuStep's platforms, right? So LinkedIn, and we actually do TikTok now. We're really trendy now. But it's also looking at the company and seeing if they are on LinkedIn, and then I follow them. That's an important bridge to gap, right? You want to understand what that company is doing. You want to understand the customers that they're servicing, and following them on LinkedIn, following them on any of the social media platforms is truly beneficial to getting to know them even better than you do before the meeting starts.
Perfect. And then do you have any good strategies for how to keep the attention of potential business partners after your first meeting?
Yeah, that's a great question. So before going there, I announce it on our platform in the social media post that I am going to Arab Health, or I am going to Medica, the largest medical trade show in the world. And so with that, afterwards, in order to keep my company top of mind, you have to give yourself a cadence. And by that, I mean, it's a certain protocol of follow-up. Otherwise, you won't remember. Immediately after a meeting, you're going on to the next meeting, or at a trade show, you're meeting partners after partners. And at the end of the day, you really have to sit down and write down. Otherwise, you'll forget, especially, as we age, we forget some things that we shouldn't forget. And so writing it down, and then giving yourself enough time at the end of the day or beginning of the day to reach out to those guests that you've met with and reiterate the conversation and the follow-up that you had discussed during those meetings. And then when you get back to the States, continue to do that follow-up. So mine is 1 week after, so right after the meeting, and then 1 week after, and then 2 weeks, in whatever cadence your company feels comfortable with. After a 6-month cadence set, right, then I move to a year. But I always ensure that I'm watching that company, even if the interaction has lagged, to ensure that I can send them frequent emails, not to bombard them, but to remind them that we met at a certain trade show and that we now have a solution for what they're looking for, because I'm continuing to look at their posts and I'm continuing to look at their websites.
Perfect. I do have one more question. I was also curious how you identify which trade shows or trade missions are the best fit for you to attend.
Yeah, John actually outlined this really well. You first have to understand what the trade show or trade mission is servicing. So if there's regulatory concerns about products, right, and you can't meet those hurdles, you should know that far in advance before trying to even spend some of your company's money to trade those missions and or trade shows. For me, we're in the medical field, and so if the trade show is anything about healthcare, we actually that rises to the top. And so we partner with companies that provide healthcare services, hospital environments, rehab clinics. And we're fortunate that the state of Michigan actually does a great job on vetting those customers, or their trade missions are around healthcare. We do a great job with automotive, right? We hear about that every day. But the state of Michigan does a great job around healthcare. And not every trade mission is going to be the one that you want to attend. It might not benefit your needs. So in some countries, you may not get past the hurdle of being able to export to that country, but you should try to do as much research prior so that you're not floundering once you get there. And the other part of that is you make great friends along the way. I've known Hannah now for a few years. All of the attendees that I've gone with for the state of Michigan at the U.S. Pavilion, at Arab Health, I'm still in contact with. And they're great resources to answer questions. I'm not, even in John's presentation, I had the pleasure of introducing him at one of our global business club meetings. And even today, he uncovered some things that I jotted down because you're always learning. And I can always feel comfortable either reaching out to John or to Chris or whoever's on this panel. They become your friends, but they also become great resources for us to continue to use in the future.
Perfect. For one more question, because I know that you mentioned that you now actually have your own booths at some trade shows. I was curious, do you ever work with third-party companies, or how do you actually put your booth together?
That's a great question. So we try to put a booth into a location where we're underdeveloped and we have a distributor. And so with the distributor's help, we will walk into shows so that we're supporting that distributor. So I'm looking for partners outside of the United States to sell our products, and I need to help them continue. It's not just about a one and done, right? Great. They issued me a purchase order for a couple $100,000, but that business is not going to thrive until you continue to support that customer. Right. So John mentioned about the STEP program. It goes beyond trade missions. If you're going to a country and you're helping to train those individuals, that's supporting exports, and that actually can be a part of the STEP reimbursement. He mentioned about translations. Our product is a piece of exercise equipment with a console. We utilized resources from the state of Michigan to help us do translations, right? So the user manuals of any product that you sell has to have a user translation that is in the country language that you're selling to. So research it, ask questions. Anyone on this panel that's talking today, and Hannah, we all have contacts within the international space, if you will. We're all here to help, and we all learn from each other, and we continue to do that.
Perfect. Well, that about wraps up my questions. If anyone else in the audience has further questions for either Linda, for John, for Chris, or if anyone on the panel here has any extra comments or last minute best practices, please feel free to share.
Yeah, I'd like to echo actually what Linda said, a couple of things. They're really important. There's nothing more frustrating than getting home from a trade show and looking at cards and not knowing what the conversation was about. I want to emphasize before you leave each day, every card in your hand needs to be on Excel with notes and a follow-up plan, because you'll forget by day two. You're meeting with 100 people a day. So exactly what Linda said there. Take your notes down, put your action plan down. You're hungry, you're tired, the dogs are barking, after walking 12 miles. Do not leave the show until you put your notes down. Or as soon as you get to the hotel, pull out the cards, get it Excel out, write down the notes. By day two, it's out of your mind. And you're looking at another 20, 50, 70 cards. So I definitely want to emphasize that.
Perfect. We do have one new question in the chat. So can you summarize which markets are most accessible in this geopolitical environment? And I
Sure.
assume this might also be targeted possibly based on industry, but yes, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Sure, of course. I happened to be in China during the elections, and so they actually told me in the middle of the day who won our election because I wasn't really paying attention. I was trying to train them, so I found that humorous. I believe the easiest to get into today in entering a market is the EU. Although it might be the most difficult to manage because of all of the different languages, when you travel throughout the EU, it's so accessible to go from country to country to country. And typically, when you meet a good distributor in one country, most likely they know a really good distributor in another. And so for me, the EU represents by far easily 50% of my exporting today. My second largest market is the Asian market. Japanese culture aligns with what we align in for my product and in healthcare, and then the Chinese market. So those both represent really good exports. If you're not doing business in Canada today, you should, right? With the free trade agreement between Canada and Mexico, it's probably your easiest point of exporting. The most challenging for my industry for healthcare is the South America market. And that is because we make a product that is not is fully assembled, and so the VAT to get to some countries in South America for my product in healthcare is extraordinarily high. The only way you're going to figure out how to tap into that market is to support their countries with some subassembly or partner with another country to do a joint business venture, if you will.
Perfect. John, I don't know if you had any additional thoughts on that or.
Yeah, it'll vary a little bit by product or service or capability. But sometimes starting simple, Canada and Mexico, in our time zones, easily navigable, very strongly supported by our foreign offices who really know their way around there. A lot of people actually already sell to Canada and they forget Canada is actually another country with, different agreements and they're already successful there. So that's often a good first step. Um, the defense industry is pretty active right now, farming as well, agriculture. There's easy access to, large markets in India, but there's challenges there. There's regular trade missions to India and Mexico via the MEDC and Automation Alley, who's one of our good partners as well. But yeah, feel free to, reach out to the MEDC or Hannah and her group. They do investigations daily on who's successful in what markets, what products or services are in need or maybe overrepresented and not a good market for you. So a lot of this evaluation can be done very quickly and very cost effectively, if not for free.
Um, this is another question that I'm not sure if this is too soon to have any updates on, but we do have a question asking about if the state of Michigan might be taking any particular steps that could help with potential tariff increases and how this could affect supply chain issues.
I think that's the $1 million question. And a lot of folks, we've kind of gone through this 4 years ago or 8 years ago. And so I think at that time there was an exemption process and there, wasn't a perfect system. I think a lot of industry groups right now are trying to get to the bottom of this. And I think it's something that we all will be hearing more about. But there has been some precedents to having dealt with this. So at this point, if you belong to a trade group, I think a trade group is the best place. I think in the end, the state will be here to try to support businesses, but I think the lead's going to come from trade groups. And that's kind of my personal opinion.
Thank you for that insight, Chris. We do have one more question. So this is from Eve. So have you ever carried a small notebook during a show, fixing one business card per page with handwritten notes on that conversation? The result is a guide to every meeting in chronological order throughout the show. You can later transfer to Excel, etc. Does anyone else use this approach or any other ideas for how to take notes while also being, easily transportable and fast?
Yeah, I think that's actually a great idea, right? A little notebook. I'm getting into the year 2024 here with my cell phone. So I'll take a picture of the card now, and then I can write notes in it so that I don't lose the information or I don't lose the notebook. But you start out with a notebook and anything that can help you remind things. I've even gone to a point where I'm describing the individual so that I remember what the person looks like, so that it kind of jogs your memory as to what the conversation was about. But that might be an age thing.
John or Chris, I don't know if you had anything to add to that or things that
And
you.
usually ask people if they're on LinkedIn as well, because then often you'll get the visual on them. Some of the chatty stuff, where are you from, what do you do? That's often on people's LinkedIn profiles, so it's a great way to remind yourself a little bit more of that conversation. But I'll generally ask that. And then also speaking of LinkedIn, one thing I always did was I looked for user groups. Most every product or service or capability, as a company that you're trying to sell will often have a user group there, and that's a great way to, meet other people or, find out where other people are successful as well.
Perfect. Well, with that, I believe that we've answered all current questions. So yeah, I just want to say a big major thank you to Chris, John, and Linda. And as mentioned, we will be sending a copy of John's presentation, and we've also recorded today's session, so we'll be sending a link to that as well. And thank you as well to everyone who attended today.
Yep. Thank you for putting this
Thank
on,
you.
Hannah.
Yeah.
Linda, so nice to hear you embracing and working the process and having great success with it. I absolutely love hearing that.
Thank you. It's been extremely beneficial for myself personally, but us as a company. More importantly, us as a company. I couldn't have done it without the support of the state of Michigan in all avenues. And so I advise anyone that's on here to take advantage of it. The Michigan Global Business Council and Club is a great start. You can learn a lot of things, but certainly reach out. We're here to help. I'm here to help any other small business or medium business. And I know that everyone on the team here, I can use as a resource as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.